This teaching was originally live-streamed June 2020 from Menla Retreat in Dewa Spa in the heart of the Catskills. To learn more about upcoming online programs, please visit menla.org.
So here we are, Chapter 12. Those of you who made it all the way through, congratulations. And congratulations to me for making it all the way through, with you giving me the good reason. And thanks to you for that. Those of you who maybe checked later, you only saw this, you should maybe try to go back. I'll just read it, you don't have to listen to me. Just read the text, it's so neat. But anyway, so we got the basics. Before you do the magical Doctor Who, Super Tantra stuff, you've got to question your perception of the world, that it really is exactly what you think it is. You have to renounce some kind of ordinary things that we normally take, we put it too high a priority, our purpose of this life, as the Tibetans put it. You have to develop love and compassion for others. And then you have to understand the whole teaching of selflessness, which does not mean, by the way, you sort of go around and eradicate yourself. You don't change a single thing about yourself, because you are the way you are, just from beginningless. But you change the way you perceive yourself. You perceive yourself more and more realistically, and less unrealistically. And the more realistically you perceive yourself, the happier you are because you realize you're much greater than you're trained or you're conditioned to think you are, in one way. And maybe in some superficial vanity level, or sort of minor self-centered level, you're of course less important than you think you are. But in reality, you're much greater than you think you are. That's the great thing. When you give up the sort of vain, distorted way of thinking you are a certain way, when you give that up, at the time maybe you feel, oh, I'm really getting wiped out here, or I'm letting go of everything, or whatever. I have to give it all up. But what you discover is you're so much greater than you thought. And because you are one with a reality that is just beyond this, like amazing grace. I was lost, and then I was found. Amazing grace. That's what it is. Amazing grace. I learned something today, reading something about the word charisma. Charista in Greek means grace. So charisma means a gracious person. And connecting it back to the sort of ritual sense of gracious as blessed by the divine, as blessed by love, which means, and blessed by the divine, by the way, doesn't mean some great grumpy God thinks you're great because you went out and killed somebody in her or his or its name. Blessed by the divine means that the real divine is love. The more powerful divine is the love. Demonic hatred and violence and domination is demonic. And love, from the strength of a being that feels it's one with the infinite plenitude of the universe, the clear light of the freedom, the clear light of the void, the clear light of emptiness, that kind of love, inexhaustible will to the happiness of the beloved, that's what's most real, and therefore what's most divine. And therefore being gracious means feeling that coming through you, feeling that as your natural default energy. Not sort of sitting back saying, oh, I said a great thing, or I did something really neat, so I'm great. That's a fake one. But just when you, without thinking, do it, that benefits someone else, then that's it. Then that's what you are. You are the benefit of those beings, which means love. Okay? You got it? So we went through all that, right? So then you get that. Then you get the consolation of the invalid, and we're all invalids now. Even he said it's so great in the context of Corona apocalypse, because he said, My sickness comes from ignorance and the thirst for existence. That's my sort of separate existence, myself as a separate, self-centering being. And it will last as long as do the sicknesses of all living beings. So they're all sick, all these coronavirus victims. And before that, the bats were sick, and the animals are sick, and they're being extinguished and so forth. And so we're all living beings, we're all sensitive beings, we're all sentient beings, that means living beings, to be free from sickness. I also would not be sick. Why? Manjushri, for the bodhisattva, and here he confesses to be a bodhisattva, which doesn't mean that he's so great. It just means that he feels he is completely interrelated with other beings, and that their welfare is his welfare, and his welfare is their welfare. However effectively he can enact that, however efficiently he can deal with that, is another matter of how enlightened or not. So you can be a bodhisattva if that's your wish, if that's your vow, if that's your determination. Maybe you can't make anybody else that happy when you start out, because you don't know even how to make yourself happy, although if you develop that kind of a will, that kind of a determination, that automatically will make you more happy. As Dalai Lama always says, if you want to be happy, or if you want to be successfully selfish, be a wise selfish, and make someone else happy, then you will be happy. Or he sometimes says, when you get a wish to make someone happy, when you make the bodhisattva vow that you're going to make everyone happy, the first person who gets some benefit from that is yourself. You get more happy with that just with the orientation, even though you haven't done a thing for anybody else so far. But by having that orientation, you're happier automatically. That's being a wise selfish. So don't think, that the bodhisattva is a martyr, doormat. They go around thinking, what can I do for everybody else? And they themselves get trampled on. Sometimes they do at an advanced stage, because they get even pleasure out of that. If it makes somebody else happy, if there's just some evil demon tramples on them, and just realizes that doesn't make them any more happy and has to find some more people to trample on, then that does not make them happy, and they won't want to be trampled like that. But if it would actually help anybody, they would be happy to do it when they reach a certain level of understanding that they are much bigger than whatever part of them might be trampled on. So that you can't really trample on them, because they are everything. That's a high stage. We're all living, I would also not be sick. Why? For the bodhisattva, the world consists only of sensitive beings, and sickness is inherent in living in the world. We're all sensitive beings free of sickness. The bodhisattva also would be free of sickness. For example, Manjushri, when the only son of a merchant is sick, both his parents become sick on account of the sickness of their son. And the parents will suffer as long as that only child does not recover from his sickness. Just so Manjushri, the bodhisattva, loves all sensitive beings as if each were his only child. He becomes sick when they are sick, and is cured when they are cured. You ask me, Manjushri, whence comes my sickness? The sicknesses of the bodhisattvas arise from great compassion. So that is really, that's in our coronavirus context. Yeah, so then, moving on to chapter 5 or 4, depending on how you count them, then you get about the consolation of the invalid, and sort of wisdom and compassion being indivisible. And then as soon as you get that, you start getting the magic of the bodhisattva. Because when you as soon as you get that, you might think, well, if all beings are sick and I'm going to be happy until they're all well, I'll never feel well, because there's so many of them, and it'll be endless, And you get discouraged. So that's when he teaches the inconceivable liberation, which in a way is really Tantra. That's the magic of Tantra. That's based on the realization of freedom and emptiness. Because realization of freedom and emptiness and voidness, or whatever you want to call it, the openness, you could say, of reality is not ending up living in a blank space at all, or annihilating your awareness of anything, being just an infinity, a blank infinity. What it is realization that all reality is all this relative intertwinement, that emptiness is relativity, that freedom is relationality. But when you realize that it all is relationality, you don't feel bound by it in the same way. You feel free within it. And then you realize you contribute to the nature of it, how it's structured and how people experience it and how you experience it. And you then become an artist of life. You become an artist about your own structure of experience. You become an artist of reaching out to help others restructure their experience, to enjoy life rather than suffer life, to see beauty rather than ugliness, to be happy rather than miserable, to do good rather than harm people or the animals or anybody. So that's what emptiness brings you into responsibility, actually, into maturity. Because emptiness itself is empty. So there's no place you can get out of the relativity. So your total concern comes into making every little bit as better as it possibly can be. I think we made that. So that's, and then you discover, because of the infinite, amazing, astonishing nature of reality, because of the presence of so many extremely powerful, divine, human, whatever kind of enlightened beings, that it is possible magically to overcome this seeming impossible task of having to save all beings in some like one by one, or as if they were all just material things, or if they really were what they seem to be to you when you are miserable, they seem equally miserable. When you find freedom through realization of selflessness, you realize they're really free too, but they don't think they are because of their confusion. And so then you only worry about their confusion in a way. You don't get sucked into their sort of, I'm always going to be like this because of this and that physical situation or this and that mental situation. You realize their deepest mental situation is complete be here now, oneness, love, joy, bliss. They are made of bliss. In other words, you see that. I hope. I mean, I have a taste now and then. And that's why I love reading Vimalakirti. It gives me a taste. You know, and thinking about it and understanding a little bit about it. And also all the other many great teachers since Vimalakirti who themselves studied it. I'm not pretending that everything seems bliss to me. Almost, but not quite yet. Close. Or put it this way, it's like a gold vehicle thing. I know that really is what it is. I do. But I don't experience it like that. Because I'm still confused in some way. I expect it will feel different when I know that. And I don't kid myself that the imperfect way that I do experience it is the final thing. I don't sell myself short, in other words. There are some who misunderstand that. You know, the Zen thing. At first, mountains and rivers are rivers. Then there are no mountains and no rivers. And they are not mountains and not rivers. Then again, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. But the second, mountains being mountains and rivers being rivers, is not the same as the first one. No way. Because it's simultaneous with they're not what they seem to be. So that cognitive dissonance makes the mountains and happy rivers. The first mountains where the mountain could crush you, you could fall off it. The river could drown you, it could flood you. And you're worried about it, and it's not you. The second one, the mountains and you, and the rivers are you, just as much as the mountains are mountains, and the mountains are rivers. Because they're not really mountains, and they're not really rivers. They're only unreally rivers. And in reality, they're totally interwoven with you. That's the thing. Do you get that? I mean, that doesn't end it. We can go around it other ways. But that gives you a taste, okay? As it does me. So now, vision of the universe, Abhirati, and the Tathagata Akshobhya. And perhaps to prepare you for this, I should say, Akshobhya is one of the, in Tantra, he's one of the 5, what I call them archetype Buddhas, who are or contemplative Buddhas, or, Lama Govinda, the great Lama Govinda used to call them Dhyani Buddhas, that is contemplative Buddhas. Although I didn't see that in a Tibetan text exactly. But they are sort of celestial, Buddhas who have these heavenly Buddhaverses. And there's, of course, infinite, countless numbers of them, but there are 5 special ones that are kind of in the atmosphere around Shakyamuni and in the esoteric teachings of him. These are 5. And they really all are emanations of Shakyamuni or any Buddha. They're all one at that deepest level, but they're individual in things. So Akshobhya, and it means Akshobhya, the unbudgeable, the unshakable. And in different tantras, he's associated with different intuitive wisdoms. And in the highest one, the unexcelled yoga one, yoga tantras, he's associated with the wisdom of ultimate reality perfection, which is the transmutation of the addictive emotion of hatred, and has to do with seeing the deepest reality of things, And this is connected with the energy of anger, which sort of takes things apart, It destroys things. So the anger gets rechanneled in the context of intelligence. And by analyzing things and to penetrating and to discover their true nature, they kind of get taken apart. And then they are found to be their magical, empty, clear light reality is discovered by Akshobhya. By the Akshobhya intuition, ultimate reality, perfection, intuition. And another one of the important ones is Amitabha, which means infinite light. And he's associated with the western direction and with the ruby color. Akshobhya is a deep dark blue or even black color. And he's a ruby color. And his Pure Land or Buddha Land or Buddhaverse is in the western galaxies and direction galaxies. And it's a very celestial, blissful sort of Buddhaverse. It's like you have a perfect jewel body. There's like jewel streams. The ducks, when they swim on the lotus ponds, they're all made of jewel plasma. When they, instead of going quack, when they go quack, they say impermanence, selflessness, emptiness, love, compassion, wisdom, etc. So they, and Amitabha is always present. He's 84 million miles tall. And everyone there, everything there is huge, and it's just a complete, it's like the most heavenly possible choir sort of situation you can imagine. You're reborn there just in a lotus, if you want to go there, and you can go there just by remembering Amitabha's name and reciting it. I bow to you, Amitabha, or Amida, as they say, or Amitofo in Chinese, or Amida. And that, so therefore, that was it seemed like a very quick salvation to less educated Buddhists, and probably in the whole history of Buddhism, including in India, but very overtly, and which we're very aware of in China, Korea, Japan, the Pure Land Buddhists, Shin Buddhists in Japan, etc., the Amitofo people in China, they were Jingdu, I think it's called, Pure Land. They were most numerous, I think, because of the lay people, the lay Buddhists who didn't have high philosophical education. We're not necessarily high yogis, but they all had this devoted thing about this super heaven, you could say. In a way, it's like the ultimate happy hunting ground, but way beyond the ancestral one, which was one of Buddha's ways of helping beings who needed something like that. In fact, in the schools, they organized the Pure Land schools, they always say that one who gets reborn in the Buddha land, that's not nirvana. That's just a very fortunate situation of being in the proximity, in the neighborhood, in the aura, in the field of a very powerful, enlightened, infinite light being, and therefore being able to develop high understanding and high samadhi and, high compassion, high wisdom very quickly. But yet, you still have to go through compassion to develop your own Buddha body sometime, and you just start out given a Buddha body by the Amitabha. No. You would get a high bodhisattva, but then you had, like those incense bodhisattvas in the Vimalakīrti, you have to go back and struggle in a world of helping others to develop the Buddha embodiments, the Nirmanakaya, to develop that. You by just living in a paradise, you can't really develop the Nirmanakaya because there's no one, everyone's cool around you. I mean, sort of far away, there's some. You're not unaware that far away there's some things, but you have to emanate out there and cope with it to develop the skill of a Buddha. So, in other words, I'm mentioning this because the abhirati, so that's called Sukhavati. And Sukha means this kind of beatific bliss. It can also mean orgasmic bliss. So it can also be a worldly pleasure. And although the ultimate orgasmic may be the one that goes transcendent on pleasure, it's not really that pleasure is picked on, just because the smaller levels of pleasure can be addictive and therefore create addictive lust and desire, and therefore you have to be able to renounce them. But there's extreme level of pleasure also leads to enlightenment, because that energy, just like the energy of hatred, leads to total intellectual, scientific understanding of the nature of reality. So the energy of passion, of desire, leads to the individuating wisdom, in the intuition called the individuating, the creative, the wisdom that leads to compassionate activity. Because it's all perfect, but within that perfection, it's illusorily all relativity. And within that illusory relativity, there are those who don't know it's illusory and therefore are stuck in a suffering relativity. So that individuating, pratyavekshana jnana, that individuating intuitive wisdom is the one that triggers or connects so closely to the compassion. Okay, I think that's clear. So, however, Akshobhya's one over here is, you'll see the name is Abhirati. Now, Rati is the name of Cupid's wife, for example, Rati, as a goddess. Cupid being Mara, or Kama, who lives in a desire heaven, in the desire realm. And Rati is a kind of delight that has a more mundane pleasure sense to it. And you will see the nature of this Abhirati, and it's more like earthy. It's more earthy than the sort of celestial paradise idea. That's one of the key interesting insights here. Okay, so now I did read the beginning of this at the end of the last section, and I don't need to do it again, and it is just wonderful. And we left at the moment where, in a way, Vimalakirti and Shakyamuni together are standing in a public setting, looking at each other, but as Vimalakirti articulates it, without seeing each other. That is to say, in a field like the field of Vimalakirti's silence, where they are one being, and therefore neither one is the object of the other. And they just kind of look through each other and see the infinity of Buddha, of the Buddha reality. And therefore Vimalakirti articulates that by saying, when I see you, I don't see you. I see you by the way of not seeing you. So that is to say, I see you are transparent, you are clear light, I am clear light, and I am one with you as clear, we both are clear light and everybody else is. So you are never an object for me. On the other hand, I do see you, but it's in the way of not seeing you. So my seeing and not seeing is exactly the same thing. So therefore, I'm not trapped in the vision of you as an object separate from me, or me as a subject separate from you. So that's how I see you. It's like a super hug, air hug. It's like they have an air hug, but in hugging each other, they hug all life. They hug all beings. They transcend each other, and each transcends himself. So this creates an amazing field for everyone else there. And Vimalakirti articulates it beautifully. And he says all these things like, a Tathagata, because he himself is a Tathagata also. He's a layman on the social level in that culture in India, but he's neither darkness nor light. He abides in ultimate reality, yet there is no relationship between it and him. Well, let's look at it specifically. He says, Lord, when I would see the Tathagata, maybe he's sort of being more polite about it, in that he doesn't say, when I would see you, the Tathagata, but he's looking at him, he's talking to him. But he says, I see the Tathagata, I view him, / you, by not seeing any Tathagata. So I don't see a Tathagata. I'm looking at you, but I don't see Tathagata, a Buddha. Why? And Tathagata, that's true, and he picks the name Tathagata. And Tathagata, in a way, this is even more cool, that means the one who has gone to suchness. So that means that's you in your transcending form and your Dharmakaya reality level. And at that level, you're everything. So you're not this individual emanation body, even the supreme one of a Shakyamuni. You're not. So, but in your Tathagata thing, you're transcending all relativity in a certain way. So I see the Tathagata, but knowing Tathagata is out of sight, you could say. Right? So I see a being that's out of sight, that means. So, why? I see him as not born from the past, not passing on to the future, and not abiding in the present time. So this is also timeless, not just spatial. There's no present, past, or future. It's all because it's all here, present, past, and future. The expansion of our clear light being, which is one being, or rather at least not differentiable into two, one that supports this sort of illusory duality, but it's one being, is also at one time. All time is at one time. So the moment includes all moments. And then he goes through all the aggregates. The Tathagata, why? The Tathagata is the essence which is the reality of matter, but he is not matter. That's the first, physical form, the physical aggregate. He's the essence of the reality of sensation, but he's not sensation. He's the essence of reality of intellect, but not intellect. Motivation, but not motivation. Consciousness, but not consciousness. Space, but doesn't abide in any four elements. Transcending the scope of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, he is not produced in the sixth sense media. So these are the 12 media. He's not involved in the three worlds. These are the three worlds. Is free of the three defilements. Is associated with the triple liberation. Is endowed with the three knowledges. And has truly attained the unattainable. That's so amazing. So the Tathagata has reached the extreme of detachment in regard to all things, having transcended them all, but it's not a reality limit, that is to say, is not something beyond all of them, either. This was keyed me off on rereading this. He abides in ultimate reality, yet there is no relationship between it and him. Because in a way, that's refuting the implication of abides in, as if reality was other than him. Since he is reality, ultimate reality, he's not relating to it. He is ultimate reality. You don't even say he's a part of it, because he's all of it. Having transcended it, he's all of it. But it is not itself as apart from anything else, and that's another way of coming around. But here he's only saying he's not relating to it, because ultimate reality is not a different thing that you can relate to. It is you, and you are it, and that means you're everything. So there's no relationship to it. That's really critical. That there's a view that happened undoubtedly many times in Buddhism and a lot of spiritual traditions. But it's very well picked out by a particular guy who got really stuck in it and made a big thing out of it, which is called utter emptiness, where he got back into this naive absolutization of the absolute. And he said, well, what emptiness really means is that the ultimate reality, emptiness, is empty of everything else. So it's like a really far out place outside of everything. And he made a big thing out of that. by sort of not understanding the emptiness of emptiness, meaning that emptiness itself is everything, and emptiness thought of as separate from everything or transcend everything is empty of being separate from them. He abides in ultimate reality, but there is no relationship between it and him. I love that. So abides in ultimate reality, that's a relationship. But he's rejecting the grammatical presentation of abiding in it as if it were like space, like an object in space. He rejects that. There is no relationship between it and him. He is not produced from causes, nor does he depend on conditions. So this is the Tathagata, the Buddha's Dharmakaya, transcendent reality body. It's the uncreated, the unborn. It's always been the way it is. This is us. We are the Buddha's body, in other words, in that light. But we're not related to Buddha's body because it is just us. And the we who each of us who is that is also a Buddha. But we don't know it, so in a way, on the illusory level, we're not, if you follow me. So it's jumping to the result, but the result does not destroy the illusory positive relativity. It only destroys the negative relativity of thinking that our separate suffering selves versus the other, the vast infinite other universe is real. We think that's ultimate reality. I think me pounding on my chest is ultimate reality. Subliminally, I think that. That's my source of my sickness. You follow? But Tathagata is beyond. I love it. He is not without any characteristic, nor has he any characteristic. So he's neither free of one, nor does he have one. He has no single nature, nor any diversity of natures. He is not a conception, not a mental construction, nor is he a non-conception. So this is bliss void indivisible, and it's the void side of it, the Tathagata. It's bliss freedom indivisible, it's the freedom side of it. He is neither the other shore, nor this shore, nor that between. He is neither here, nor there, nor anywhere else. He is neither this nor that. This and that. Actually, this and that. He cannot be discovered by consciousness, nor is he inherent in consciousness. But he is the essence of consciousness, of course. But he is that which essence of consciousness being interrelatedness, relativity, you see. If you always remember emptiness is relativity, you get it. He is neither darkness nor light. That's clear light. That's why clear light is a little bit misleading. And I had one student who is still arguing with me, 30 years, for 25 years now, because he's desperate to call clear light brilliance. Because they use the metaphor of a diamond, simile of a diamond. And in German, the word brillant is the word for diamond. And so, I used it for a while because I was all excited. But it can't be brilliance. Moon is glowingly brilliant. Sun is brightly brilliant. That's brilliance. And those are three more subtle levels of awareness and reality, but they're not the clear light. Then you have darkness. So you have moon, sun, darkness. You remember in the Book of the Dead or in the Tantric subtle mind and extremely subtle mind classifications, experiential classifications. And then clear light is light, but it's light that is transparency. It's beyond the duality of dark and light also. So even so clear doesn't do it. So it's light that's clear of being light. It's light that's clear of being bright. Its transparency is therefore the best word for it. So luminance, radiance, immanence, and transparency, or transparence, the French one, transparence. Actually, transparence is also an English word, but a rare one. He is neither name nor sign. He is neither weak nor strong. He lives in no country or direction. He is neither good nor evil. And that enables him to be all good. He is neither compounded or uncompounded. He cannot be explained as having any meaning whatsoever. Neither generosity nor avarice. He goes through all of these things. Neither morality nor immorality, neither tolerance nor malice, neither effort nor sloth, neither concentration nor distraction, neither wisdom nor foolishness. This is the Dharmakaya itself. Contains all of those things, of course. And therefore, everything he does is good, wise, generous, tolerant, etc. He is inexpressible. He is neither truth nor falsehood, neither escape from the world nor failure to escape from the world, neither cause of involvement in the world nor not a cause of involvement in the world. He is the cessation of all theory and all practice. He's neither a field of merit nor not a field of merit. He's neither worthy of offerings nor unworthy of offerings. He's not an object and cannot be contacted. He's not a whole nor a conglomeration. He surpasses all calculations. The infinity is not a whole. You can't say the whole of infinity because it's infinite, so the whole will never reach it. He is matchless, especially in effort. He surpasses all measure. He does not go, does not stay, does not pass beyond. He's the beyond and he's the hither. He's neither seen, heard, distinguished, nor known. He is without any complexity, having attained the equanimity of omniscient intuition, intuitive wisdom, intuitive gnosis. Equal toward all things, he does not discriminate between them. He is without reproach, without excess, without corruption, without conception, and without intellectualization. He is without activity, without birth, without occurrence, without origin, without production, and without non-production. He is without fear and without subconsciousness, without sorrow, without joy, and without strain. I think I might have put stress now if I did it. No verbal teaching can express him. Such is the body of the Tathagata, and thus should he be seen. Who sees thus truly sees. Who sees otherwise sees falsely. Isn't that great? And by the way, Buddha doesn't say anything. And in the tradition, when he's silent, that means he assents to what you say. Like when you invite Buddha, would you come for lunch to my house tomorrow with the monks? When he doesn't say anything, that means yes, he will. That's a convention. You know. Then Venerable Sai, so that's a really, but he's standing with the guy. So they're both standing in a field of being infinite freedom and loving relativity. Inconceivable loving relativity. And that's the field of grace, the field of utter grace around them. And everyone around them feels that way. And they, of course, both feel that way. Or whatever way, we can't say actually, right? The Venerable Shariputra, who's feeling a little lost in that field, then asked the Buddha, and here it is like almost changing the subject. He says, in which Buddhaverse, or Buddha field, did the noble Vimalakirti die before reincarnating in this Buddha field? Because, by now he realized Vimalakirti is pretty much a inconceivable liberation bodhisattva or Buddha or whatever, he realizes that he is. So where did he die before reincarnating here? Because he knows you have to leave the old body to have his new body, which was born Vimalakirti in the citizen of Vaishali, with Vaishalian mothers and fathers. And Buddha said, now let him change the topic and is not scolding him about, well, he never died and he's not born and blah, blah. The Tathagata level is back on the illusion level, happily. And he says, Shariputra asked this good man directly where he died to reincarnate here. Then the Venerable Shariputra asked Alishavi Vimalakirti, noble sir, where did you die to reincarnate here? And Vimalakirti declared, of course, Vimalakirti has to always, he's like Manjushri, has to always go for the ultimate. So he says, is there anything among the things that you see, elder, that dies or is reborn? Whoops, now the elder knows. Shariputra has to say, no, there's nothing that dies or is reborn. In real reality, no, there's no death and no rebirth. Vimalakirti says, likewise, Reverend Shariputra, as all things neither die nor are reborn, why do you ask, where did you die to reincarnate here? Reverend Shariputra, if one were to ask a man or woman created by a magician where he or she had died to reincarnate there, what would you think he or she would answer? Noble sir, of course, a magical creation does not die, nor is it reborn. Reverend Shariputra, did not the Tathagata declare that all things have the nature of a magical creation? And now here, see, this is you can see Shariputra has come some way here, because this is the same dialogue he had with the goddess about male and female, remember? And he was resisting that. But here he right away jumps in, oh no, nothing dies, nothing is reborn. He's learned it now. Yes, noble sir, that is so. That is indeed so. Reverend Shariputra, since all things have the nature of this magical creation, why do you ask, where have you died to reincarnate here? Reverend Shariputra, death, quote unquote, is an end of performance, and rebirth, quote unquote, is the continuation of performance. But although a bodhisattva dies, he does not put an end to the performance of the roots of virtue. And although he is reborn, he does not adhere to the continuation of sin. So here's where, I love this, because you know, when that beyond good and evil and all that beyond this and that, he's neither this nor that, you know, all that sort of language, that led a lot of non-Buddhist theologians in past dialogues that I've had throughout my scholarly life, academic life. You see, really the Buddhists have no ethics. They don't have real good and real bad. Enlightenment is like there's no good and no bad, so how can you say they have ethics? But you notice that after doing that in the ultimate level, on the relative level, they always focus on the good. For example, so when he brings it back to the relative, he says, well, now he's back to the relative because he's allowing the bodhisattva to die here. He just said nothing does. Now he says, but although a bodhisattva does die, he does not put an end to the performance of the roots of virtue. So in other words, he says always making virtue, even though if he's up at the beyond, at the conceivable liberation level or Buddha level, he's beyond virtue and sin, but still he always performs the roots of virtue. And although he is reborn, he does not adhere to the continuation of sin. So there is no sin for that person. So being beyond good and evil is to be able to be only good. And that's and therefore to be ethical. That's really, really deep and important, although it's deep on the surface. Because it has to do with how you engage with relativity when you know it's all ultimately beyond good and evil. Relatively, that makes you able to be only good, if you follow. That's really, really good. Now, then the Buddha always, to get an answer out of Vimalakirti, has to interfere. He wants to satisfy Shariputra and everybody else's curiosity on the relative level. So he says, so then the Buddha said to Venerable Shariputra, Shariputra, this holy person came here from the presence of the Tathagata Akshobhya in the universe Abhirati. Intense delight, that means abhirati, super delight. Shariputra said, Lord, it is wonderful that this holy person, having left a Buddhaverse as pure as abhirati, should enjoy a Buddhaverse as full of defects as this Saha universe, Saha Buddhaverse, your Buddhaverse. You know, he's still kvetching like he did at the beginning, you know, about how Shakyamuni's Buddhaverse was full of flaws, right? So on the superficial level, it does have flaws. So he's saying that only. He's keeping his realistic common sense. So then Vimalakirti again repeated what Buddha said when Vimalakirti wasn't there in the first chapter. And he said, Shariputra, what do you think? Does the light of the sun accompany the darkness? And Shariputra said, certainly not, noble sir. Vimalakirti, then the two do not go together. Noble sir, those two do not go together. As soon as the sun rises, all darkness is destroyed. And Vimalakirti said, then why does the sun rise over the world? And Shariputra says, in other words, why does there seem to be a difference It rises to illuminate the world and to eliminate the darkness, he says. Vimalakirti said, just in the same way, Reverend Shariputra, the bodhisattva reincarnates voluntarily in the impure Buddha fields in order to purify the living being, sensitive beings, in order to make the light of wisdom shine, and in order to clear away the darkness. Since they do not associate with the passions, the addictive passions, they dispel the darkness of the passions of all living beings. So this is interesting. So he says, sun, so that's, when he says, does the light of the sun accompany the darkness? So this is, again, critiquing Shariputra's idea that there are defects here. And he is saying there is no darkness here, and there are no defects here, really, in this exchange, And Shariputra says the two do not go together, they don't. But when the sun rises, all darkness is destroyed. So Vimalakirti, Shariputra may be not quite getting the implication of the simile, which Vimalakirti means, which is that I'm here. So there's no difference between me being in Abhirati and being here. And the fact that I am here means the sun is risen, the sun of pure Buddhaverse is here. And Shakyamuni is here, for crying out loud. And just like Akshobhya is there, so once there's a Buddha here, that's the sun, and there's no darkness here, actually, except those who think there is, so the ignorance, So he says, why does the sun rise over the world? In other words, if the darkness cannot be coexisting with light, why do you suddenly have light, and why do you have that difference, seeming difference? And then he says, well, it rises to illuminate the world and to eliminate the darkness. So he sees it as a causal process. And then Vimalakirti says, just in the same way, Reverend Shariputra, the bodhisattva reincarnates voluntarily in the impure Buddha fields. And by impure or imperfect, he just means they're being maintained that way, but they are completely, once there's a Buddha in it, then the land is the Buddhaverse. That's a Buddha land. No matter what the level of infrastructure that Buddha has invested in, depending on the needs of the beings living in it. So he's pushing that thing in a subtle way. In order to purify the sentient beings, in order to make the light of wisdom shine, because the light of wisdom the beings have. They're made also of wisdom, the beings, already. But they haven't dampened it down themselves, but not really, because they only think it's dampened because they're ignorant. That means they don't know how they actually are. If they knew how they actually are, they're all made of light to start with, you see. So the light of wisdom shine in order to clear away the darkness. Since they do not associate with the addictions, they dispel the darkness of the addictions of all sentient beings. Thereupon the entire multitude expressed the desire to behold the universe Abhirati, the Tathagata Akshobhya, his bodhisattvas, and his great disciples. The Buddha, knowing the thoughts of the entire multitude, said to the disciple Vimalakirti, noble child, this multitude wishes to behold the universe Abhirati, and the Tathagata Akshobhya. Show them. He holds him a noble child because he's a child of Buddhahood, but actually Vimalakirti is the same age as Shakyamuni pretty much. Then the child of Vimalakirti thought, without rising from my couch. And notice, it seems that Vimalakirti, when he picked up the whole group in his hand back in his own house, he also picked up his couch. Because he's now got the couch there in the garden. He's still on the couch. It's a flying couch. I can't believe it. I never noticed that before that. He came with the couch. They were in his hand. And I remember I said he came in hand, even himself in the hand, then he moved himself up. But he was bringing the couch with him too. Maybe with the other hand. I love it. So, without rising from my couch, I shall pick up in my right hand the universe, Abhirati, and all it contains. Now, why do I call it a universe here? Actually, it's a Buddhaverse, or a Buddha field, but he's just calling it a Jiktin Jikam, a Lokadatu, So that's what I'm translating. But to say, look at that, you could say universe, you could say solar system, because there's a sun and moon involved, but there are also stars, and then there are also these realms of pure matter and heavens and things, and then there's formless realms. So, a Lokadhatu is more like a universe than like a solar system. And then they have the billion world Lokadhatus. It has billion worlds. So it's like a galaxy or a nebula or something, or maybe the whole universe. So it's very hard to say what to translate it as. So if you have if you dwell on one of the physicists' fantasies about a multiverse, then you could have many universes in a multiverse, as constituting a multiverse. And I think it's something like that. But the cosmological terms don't work very well, in the different things. And it isn't that our physics is so great, I have to say. I read a thing on Quora just by chance today. I wasted my time. I can never get out of my email, dealing with things I'm having to deal with, in keeping Menla and Tibet House and everything alive. And so I saw this Quora question by somebody saying, well, if the Big Bang expanded from some minuscule microscopic size, subatomic size, to the whole huge vast universe in a split second, then it must have operated faster than the speed of light. The particles in it must have gone faster than the stars and everything, faster than the speed of light. How can you explain that? So then some big shot physicist, and so answers, and it was on this faculty and that thing and this institute and that think tank, and really big shot physicist answers it by saying, well, it isn't that it all goes in a split second. In a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second, it has its initial unfoldment sort of to the size of a grapefruit, and then another unfoldment, and these all trillionths of a second. And then he said, and yes, really fast, and then it unfolds again. And really what it is it doesn't have to go that fast, because it's space itself that's unfolding. Because there was no space before. It's just a fantasy. What on earth? They have their weird mathematics. Actually, I think my karma, I messed up my life. Up to the 12th grade, in the small quote-unquote good schools that I went to, that made me into a brainwashed weird wasp. So good they were. But anyway, I was a complete wizard at math. I never made a mistake. And I would do like 2 levels of math beyond where I was just intuitively, and always get it right. I just couldn't be stopped. I was like a mathematical idiot, savant, And I hated it. And as soon as I got to college, I did third-year college math in the 12th grade, which is how I got advanced standing in college, which is lucky because I never got a high school diploma. And they let me in as a sophomore because of all that math, but I never did a course in math in college. I hated it. I wanted to write poems, But I should have stuck with it, because they are hoodwinking people with this math and all these vectors and all these boards full of weird symbols, as if they're really getting somewhere with that. Yeah, well, they make bombs and they make aircraft and they design things. They have cosine and trigonometry and heaven knows what, and it's all great as far as whatever deals with physical reality. But when they get off into astrophysics and cosmology, and 10 dimensions and string theory, it's just a bunch of mystic theology. It makes no sense whatsoever. But they tell you that's because it doesn't make sense, because you're not initiated in our special mathematical language, special high priest symbolic weird thing like Greek or Latin or magic God language. It's God's language. Nonsense, I say. Nonsense. If space has no space, it's not space. They just call it space. Einstein's curvature of space, gravity. It's great, but it's just silly. when they pretend, it's actually fun. And there are a lot of interesting things. And they reach the limits of dealing with it. And since they have a dogma, it's all matter only. And then they don't really get this difference between energy and matter having mass. They can't quite figure that out. They can sort of make it smash and go bang. But they can't really figure out they have all dark matter energy. And then it's the trillionth of a zillion, trillionth of a second. It's just as if there was nothing there before. And so actually it all came out of nothing. It's just incoherent, actually. Anyway, I'm sorry, but it is. So, and don't let you be intimidated about your common sense about it. But the point is, conceptual schemes create context within relativity that can be validly useful within that a context about something specific. But when you try to make it expand to encompass everything and then think that it's going to really correspond to it, that's when you go off the deep end. And you're not willing to let it go, like the quantum people said. Finally have to let it go when everything comes apart in front of you and you are part of it and there's no absolute objectivity about it. And therefore matter has become meaningless because there's no non-matter. Anyway. So he says, okay, and it all it contains. It's hundreds of thousands of bodhisattvas. It's abodes of gods, dragons, trolls, fairies, titans, bounded by its mountain ranges, rivers, lakes, fountains, streams, oceans, and other bodies of water. It's Mount Meru and other hills and mountain ranges. It's moon, its sun, its stars, you see. It's so that's why you can't just make it into a solar system, because the stars are part of it. It's, again, he presents it's gods, etc., themselves. It's creator Brahma, so-called creator Brahma. We don't believe in creators, but people think he is, so we call him creator Brahma. And his retinues, its villages, cities, towns, provinces, kingdoms, men, women, and houses. His bodhisattvas, his disciples, the tree of enlightenment of the Tathagata Akshobhya, and the Tathagata Akshobhya himself, seated in the middle of an assembly vast as an ocean, teaching the Dharma. So one of the things about the Buddhaverse is Buddha always has a body in it. He doesn't go through dying away from the body, from his body. He always keeps it manifest because he's a celestial type of Buddha. Also, the lotuses that accomplish the Buddha work among the living, so the flowers are doing Buddha teaching. The 3 jewel ladders that rise from its earth to its 33 heaven. So that these jewel ladders that go to the desire realm gods, the Zeus, Indra type gods that are always down, not just now and then when a Buddha goes up and down one, on which ladders the gods of that heaven descend to the world to see, honor, and serve the Tathagata Akshobhya and to hear the Dharma, and on which the men of the earth climb to the 33 heaven to visit those gods. Like a potter with his wheel, I will reduce that universe, Abhidhati, with its store of innumerable virtues, from its watery base up to its Akanishta heaven, to a minute size, and carry so little tiny thing, and carrying it gently like a garland of flowers will bring it to this Saha universe and will show it to the multitudes. Then the Vimalakirti entered into concentration, performed a miraculous feat such that he reduced the universe Abhidhati to a minute size, took it with his right hand and brought it into the Saha universe. And then some people in Abhidhati knew that they were being moved around and they were freaked out. He said, don't worry, it's just Vimalakirti, it's not my problem. And then the other people didn't even know that it was being moved. And then it didn't increase the size of this universe, didn't decrease the size of the Abhidhati universe, and yet it was present here. Nor was the universe Abhidhati reduced internally, and both universes appeared to be the same as they had ever been, but yet everybody could see a whole universe, which is like a sort of planet / solar system / galaxy / nebula, right? It's a universe, really. And what this reminded me of is in Men in Black, the second or third one, there was these creatures that had been pursued by a horrible demon, which was the main bad guy in that movie, a real slobbering one, really bad one, could turn into male and female bodies. It was really horrendous. Forgot his name. And the whole universe had been hidden in a little jewel around the neck of a cat in the Men in Black New York universe. And then finally he liberated it somehow, and he sent it back to where it was when he got rid of that demon. So that was I'm sorry to give away the thing, but he succeeded in doing it. And then the one being of that universe that had been otherwise totally universicited, destroyed, in other words, by that particular demon. But it was reestablished somewhere, off in its own dimension. So there was a whole universe in this little kind of jewel around the neck of the cat. And that made me think of Vimalakirti bringing a bit at the universe and showing it to the people. So they all looked at it, and then Buddha Shakyamuni asked the multitudes, "Friends, behold the splendors of the universe Abhirati, the Tathagata Akshobhya, the array of his Buddha field, and the splendors of those disciples and bodhisattvas. We see them, Lord," they replied. And Buddha said, "Those bodhisattvas who wish to embrace such a Buddha field should train themselves in all the bodhisattva practices, educate themselves in all the bodhisattva practices of the Tathagata Akshobhya." And then a lot of deities and sensitive beings among the humans and gods inside the universe conceived the spirit of oneself, perfect enlightenment, and all of them formed a prayer to be reborn in the universe Abhirati. And the Buddha prophesied that in the future all would be reborn in the universe Abhirati. And the Lichavi Vimalakirti, having thus developed all the living beings who could thereby be developed, returned the universe Abhirati exactly to its former place. So now what is neat about that? Think about it. At the beginning, this world of Buddha, this Saha world, this tolerable world of Buddha, he revealed by putting his toe on it that it had a total celestial, fantastic infrastructure, that each being in it was perfectly in the right evolutionary spot for themselves to develop and get rid of their ignorance and develop their compassion and their Buddha embodiments, rather than a place filled with defects and difficulties that they had to sort of overcome even just to sort of hang out. So he reveals that first. Then second, there's a bunch of magical stuff, but then second, the universe of incense is shown in a way, and he goes for food, brings the feast back from it, and the bodhisattvas, 90 million of the bodhisattvas, come back from it, and they come into this universe, and then they are wowed by the fact that they are taught how this universe is even preferable to theirs for its efficiency of speed, of helping the evolution of the beings through evolving them through compassionate activities, as well as developing wisdom type samadhis and wisdom education. So that's the second different universe you see. But then that leaves intact a kind of, so first, this universe is not what it seems and actually is a perfect one, even with its seemingly defective infrastructure. Second, there's a sort of perfect, semi-perfect infrastructure, but yet that's said to be not as good as this one. But then there's a kind of middle way universe, which is a universe that has mountains, lands and streams and cities and towns and people and so forth. And it has an earth. It isn't just all incense or all lotuses like Sukhavati. And then and it has heavens and gods and humans, but they're more interactive, the gods and humans, more openly interactive. The Buddha is more like an earthy Buddha. He's on the earth, but the gods come to the earth to study with him. And so it's sort of closer to, it's a midway between the super celestial and the infrastructure of Shakyamuni's Buddhaverse. So it has animals and things as well, So in a way, and what is interesting is Milarepa, in Milarepa's autobiography in Tibet, it tells the story of his autobiography to Rechungpa, his disciple, when he's already passed away, and he's in Abhirati, exactly. So it seems like those more earthy type siddhas, the great adepts, of the sort of Buddhas who look like tribals, or they look like weavers, or they're all infiltrated all over the system. They're not all wealthy trade people like Vimalakirti or bankers or whatever he was, a minister, a noble. They're very, carpet weavers. wrestlers, there are different people like that, artists, women, and even tribals. And but they like that abhidhati, so they operate between all different types. So it shows kind of the variety of Buddhaverses and the variety of destinations, and it sort of enhances one's sense of being in a universe where the Buddha goodness, the all good, Samantabhadra Buddha goodness, is really manifested, and is, so in other words, it kind of gives you more context within which to be inspired to see the Buddhaversal nature of this infrastructure here, of this world, which is so beautiful and so green. It's like the medicine Buddha revelation, you know, where in the medicine Buddha, where Shakyamuni himself turns into a medicine Buddha. He turns into this blue Buddha, according to the medicine Buddha Sutra. And there are 7 other medicine Buddhas come and kind of join and support him from a different universe, because they really like him, because they say he was brave to come to a world that seemed to be filled with defects, and where people had wars and did terrible things and were stupid, because he was able to bring this thing even in such a infrastructure, even to make an advantage out of the short lifespans, only 100 years and stuff, of the people during this period. On this earth, there will be periods where people have 1,000-year lifespans, according to the Buddhist cosmology. So, you know, there's 1,000 Buddhas, this is only 1 out of 1,000. So, in that context, it really helps. It's kind of a wonderful thing. He shows a land that's more like our planet. So, what our planet can aspire to be, he shows that, which kind of, you know, it kind of rejects sort of the simplistic renunciative cosmology that it just goes down in Kali Yuga and then comes back and goes down and comes back. And it doesn't, you know, they don't have the idea of a Buddhaverse. They don't have the idea that to become a Buddha, you change the whole environment that you're in and you make it enlightened. So you're enfolding beings in a mandala, in an enlightened environment. And whereas this Mahayana Sutra slips it in, you see, without directly having to challenge it in a visionary way. So, so then, you know, they all are happy, and he asks, you know, the lucky Lord Shakyamuni said to Shariputra, Shariputra, did you see that universe abhidhati in the Tathagata Akshobhya? And Shariputra replied, I saw it, Lord. May all living beings come to live in a Buddhaverse as splendid as that. May all living beings come to have the miraculous powers just like those of the noble Licchavi Vimalakīrti. So he's kind of enthusiastic finally, Shariputra. And we have that he continues. He said, we have gained great benefit from having seen a holy man such as he. We have gained a great benefit from having heard such teaching of the Dharma, whether the Tathagata himself still actually exists or whether he has already attained ultimate liberation. Hence, there is no need to mention the great benefit of those who, having heard it, believe it, rely on it, embrace it, remember it, read it, and penetrate to its depth, and having found faith in it, teach, recite, and show it to others, and apply themselves to the yoga of meditation upon its teaching. Those living beings, he keeps on, Sariputta, who understand correctly this teaching of the Dharma, will obtain the treasure of the jewels of the Dharma. Those who study correctly this teaching of the Dharma study correctly this teaching of the Dharma will become the companions of the Tathagata Buddha. Those who honor and serve the adepts of this doctrine, teaching, I don't know, I use doctrine here, I know way, teaching, will be the true protectors of the Dharma. Those who write, teach, and worship this teaching of the Dharma will be visited by the Tathagata in their homes. Those who take pleasure in this teaching of the Dharma will embrace all merits. Those who teach it to others, whether it be no more than a single stanza of 4 lines or a single summary phrase from this teaching of the Dharma, will be performing the great Dharma sacrifice. And those who devote, the Dharma sacrifice means, here sacrifice means a giveaway, or potlatch actually. What he means by a Dharma sacrifice means a potlatch, or giving away of the teaching. And those who devote to this teaching of the Dharma, their tolerance, their zeal, their intelligence, their discernment, their vision, and their aspirations, thereby become subject to the prophecy of future Buddhahood. And of course, that's a wonderful thing in the life of Shakyamuni. There's this thing called Vyakarna, which means like prediction or prophecy. And it's where at a certain moments, Buddha will say to so-and-so, okay, I see now in your future, which of course is present to the Buddha. So in that sense, he's like, can be like an oracle. And he says, I see in such and such a universe, after so and so many aeons, you will become the Buddha with the name so-and-so, and the name of that universe will be such and such. And he will sometimes say a few more things about what it will be like. So that was the end of it in a way, but there is a kind of epilogue, very short, not too short. It should be short, but it's not as short as that. Like really almost another chapter. I called it Epilogue. And this would be the 12th chapter in the counting of the which I will change to that counting. That's the counting of the Tibetan and the Sanskrit, where 3 and 4 are one chapter, which I separated in two. The reason I separated in two is because the Vimalakirti in East Asia is famous because he critiques the monks, the great apostles, the disciples, like Shariputra, etc. But the last bunch in what I made the 4th chapter were lay people. They were lay bodhisattvas. Even one of them was Maitreya, the next Buddha on this earth, supposedly. And so I thought that it should be more balanced because he's an equal opportunity critic. He doesn't just go after monks, which is how the lay people in East Asia kind of liked him, especially for that. But he was on the case of the lay people too. Any trace of dualism he would find, he'd go after it. That was his job, like a Manjushri of Vimalakirti was. So then I'm not going to do another thing here, or I might touch on it. But basically, what Shariputra said is almost what this is about, where the Indra, who really is Odin, now we have all this wonderful, I love the Thor movies, by the way. I don't know if you do like such simple-minded comic book things, but I love them. And I especially love the Thor movies, and I'm so sad in Ragnarok that they destroyed Valhalla because it was such a beautiful place. And that rainbow bridge and everything, but they better make another one. Well, see, that's like a Vimalakirti thing. They destroyed that and they all went somewhere. The people, the gods of Valhalla. I don't know. But I love that. And so Indra means Odin, actually. The name Indra is connected to Odin, Indo-European father god who lives in the heavenly city. And indirectly it's connected to Zeus, although the Sanskrit word is different, because in a stratum of the Vedas, which are the old Indo-European songs, mystical and also tribal songs, the chief god was Dyaus, D-Y-A-U-S, which means the sky. So the heavenly vault was God, And Dyaus and D-Y-A, Zia is like a Z, Dyaus, Zeus, that becomes cognate. So that's all kind of one idea of the father god, But of course in India, the Zeus figure pales by comparison in the richness of Indian spirituality, eventually, with the sort of Brahma, the sort of pure realm of pure form, because Indra's Zeus heaven, or Odin, Zeus, Valhalla, that heaven, is still on the tip of the cosmic mountain, on the peak of the cosmic mountain, like Olympus. So it's connected to the earth in the sort of different cosmology, whereas the Brahma is in the realm of pure form, like way off, like a big giant whale realm of gigantic proportions, And that's where the Buddha lands are, up in the event horizon of the void and all this. The black holes, really. You can go wild with the cosmology of it. And so both Indra and Brahma are those two levels of more abstract, absolute type deity, and then more humanoid, sort of cosmic mountain sitting deity. Those were the two ones, and both levels are still intact in the Indian version of the Indo-European religion. Probably because when the Indo-European warriors came in 10,000 years ago, started coming into India, they encountered a much more advanced civilization than their own warlike thing. And they, more feminine controlled probably city-states with very powerful agriculture and very wealthy Garden of Eden type garden of the 5 rivers of the Indus and so forth, the Harappan civilization. So anyway, but this name is Chakra, means Indra, it's one of his names. And he said to the Buddha, and he really likes this Vimalakirti, and he says, Lord, and he's been hanging through the whole thing. Formerly I have heard from the Tathagata and from Manjushri, the crown prince of wisdom, many hundreds of thousands of teachings of the Dharma. But I have never before heard a teaching of the Dharma as remarkable as this instruction in the entrance into the method of inconceivable transformations. Lord, those living beings who, having heard this teaching of the Dharma, accept it, remember it, read it, and understand it deeply, will be without a doubt true vessels of the Dharma. There is no need to mention those who apply themselves to the yoga of meditation upon it. They will cut off all possibility of unhappy lives, will open their way to all fortunate lives, will always be looked after by all Buddhas, will always overcome all adversaries, and will always conquer all devils. They will practice the path of the bodhisattvas, will take their places upon the seat of enlightenment, and will have truly entered the domain of the Tathagatas. A lucky Lord, the noble sons and daughters who will teach and practice this exposition of the Dharma will be honored and served by me and my followers. Okay, so Zeus, Odin, Indra, the king of those mundane gods, desire realm gods, they're going to be on your case when you study this text. When you teach it to others, you don't always listen to it from me, you teach it yourself. To the villages, towns, this is all teacher training. Okay? To the villages, towns, cities, states, kingdoms, and capitals, wherein this teaching of the Dharma will be applied, taught, and demonstrated, I and my followers will come to hear the Dharma. So Zeus will come to hear it. He needs it, he gets in a lot of trouble, Zeus. He has family troubles. He's a little bit, the Me Too movement among the gods is going to get on his case because he's always like running and lusting after some creatures. And so he needs this teaching, We'll come to hear the Dharma. I will inspire the unbelieving with faith, and I will guarantee my help and protection to those who believe and uphold this Dharma. That's so cool. So then Buddha says to Shakra, thank you, excellent, excellent Prince of the Gods. The Tathagata rejoices in your good words. Prince of Gods, the enlightenment of the Buddhas of past, present, and future are expressed in this discourse of the Dharma. Therefore, Prince of Gods, when noble sons and daughters accept it, repeat it, understand it deeply, write it completely, and make it into a book, honor it, those sons and daughters thereby pay homage to the Buddhas of past, present, and future. Let us suppose, Prince of Gods, that this billion-world galactic universe were as full, then he goes through a long thing, you fill up with jewels to offer to all the Buddhas, but that would be very notorious, infinite numbers of Buddhas, you get infinite offerings to them, would that be great? He says, yes, it would, a lot of merits. And then Buddha said, have faith, Prince of Gods, whoever accepts this exposition of the Dharma called instruction in the inconceivable liberation, recites it and understands it deeply, he or she will gather merits even greater than those who perform the above acts. So much greater than all that giving. Why so? Because, Prince of the Gods, the enlightenment of the Buddhas arises from the Dharma, and one honors them by the Dharma worship, and not by material worship. Thus it is taught, Prince of Gods, and thus you must understand it. So then he tells a whole story about, but I want to say one thing about that. I have one thing to say about that. I like it. I didn't notice before this part. Why, you see? Why is it they should make such a fuss about this teaching? Because the enlightenment of the Buddhas arises from the Dharma, and one honors them by the Dharma worship, which he's going to define in a minute. And not by material, and that means Dharma worship means study, the education of yourself by the Dharma, of unifying your mind on the Dharma, meaning the teaching about the nature of reality. Now, this seems very bhakti and very Buddhist to you, perhaps, and maybe it is, it's Mahayanas, but in a way it isn't also, and why this is so remarkable is, it's like science. Because Dharma means reality, remember? Dharmakaya means reality body. When Vimalakirti says he doesn't see the Buddha, that means he doesn't see any Buddhists either, except illusorily. Even you don't see Buddha, how can there be Buddhists? Right? So what that means is that enlightenment doesn't mean, just believing in Buddha. It doesn't mean, being enlightened doesn't mean accepting Buddha or accepting Buddhism. That doesn't mean that. You could be an idiot and accept Buddhism in some fanatical way and use Buddhism badly and do harm to people. Being, enlightenment means knowing the nature of reality, knowing it not only intellectually but also experientially, knowing it by becoming it. What happened?
No, we're good. We're good.
Knowing it by becoming it, by being it. So this thing of becoming a Buddhist by taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It means the real refuge is the Dharma. And because that's reality. And when it means taking refuge in reality, it means determining to be completely realistic, knowing what reality really is, not imposing your version of reality on actual reality. And that's that's like being a scientist. And that's complicated. How do you come to understand and experience reality? When you're gripped by illusion and ignorance. You have to peel away that illusion and ignorance. And Buddha is just a teacher that helps you do that. And the Sangha is just a community who enforces your educational process and who is also implementing it themselves. So therefore he's saying that this book, because it is filled with the critical non-dualist teaching, which is often the way Manjushri teaches, and particularly Vimalakirti does. And in a way, Vimalakirti makes the non-duality of the lay person and the monk Buddha, the lay Buddha and the monk Buddha. So every non-duality is embedded in this teaching. And in a way, Vimalakirti he has the tantric practices going on, the psychoneurology, the Buddhist scientific psychoneurology going on in his house. Remember the 8 wonderful things? All those Buddhas come there and then they make mandalas and so forth, and they teach that. And he, with all of his inconceivable liberation, shows the miraculous nature of transforming anything into anything, which is the nature of that. And that's something especially marvelous, and that's why Indra said that. This connects to I never thought of this before, but it connects to a particular thing about Shakyamuni Buddha. And one reason that the medicine Buddhas come to help Shakyamuni Buddha, particularly. Obviously, they must go help all the other 999 Buddhas in this world, and also there are many other in other worlds. So again, I'm only talking about relative reality, so it's not anything absolute, but still, as a nice relative story or narrative, this Buddha is this Shakyamuni Buddha, and the Buddhaverse he's made here that we have to work with, has a particular virtue and benefit having to do with Tantra and the Mahasiddhas, and therefore Tibet. Because, the Indian Mahasiddhas and then Tibet. Because he's praised among the 1,000 sons of a certain king, like zillions of aeons ago, 5 million big bangs ago. He's praised as being one who chose a time in this particular world's, rise and fall, the time of being manifest. After rise and fall within the illusory relativity. He chose a time when the human lifespan would be relatively short, 100 years, and when there would be violence and there would be struggle in the world and difficulty with the environment and challenging circumstances. And maybe and yet he's one of the only 3 who supposedly teach Tantra. The other Buddhas, people have long time, they can live 1,000 years, they get enlightened in a day, they have, they're like with Abhidhati, the Buddha never leaves. You know what I'm saying? It's sort of, the infrastructure seems to say that it's kind of easier but it takes people longer. They don't have this sort of super rapid. So in a way, Shakyamuni went to this sort of certain level of difficulty world system. In its, if you think in Star Trek terms, like a grade A prime planet is one where people are ready for the Saha type of world, where it has a paradisal element, but it also has a bit of struggle going on, and therefore you have to develop your compassion as well as your wisdom. But it's not too much struggle, you wouldn't have time to develop your wisdom, and it's not too little struggle, too cushy, and then you wouldn't develop your compassion. So it's all kind of interconnected. Vimalakirti being a siddha, this is really, really nice. And then he does mention medicine Buddha, Vaishajaraja, but he doesn't mention him as teaching medicine particularly. He teaches about how this Vaishajaraja told the prince Chandrachakra, who actually I think becomes Buddha. It's one of those former life stories he tells about how the sutras and studying them and learning them and writing them and reading them and copying them and taking care of them, this, because of the teachings that they contain, is called the Dharma worship, and it is so totally wonderful. And it's sort of long, and I don't want to go on more unless we come to it in the question and answer thing. But he goes on with that. And then Maitreya also, so then he does that in the context of Indra, really getting Indra committed, and that's Zeus. So Zeus is powerful. And he puts Zeus in charge of keeping the Vimalakirti alive and protecting the community of people associated with Vimalakirti. So they have this Zeus. I think that's really fun. And then of course, Maitreya, the next Buddha, he charges him also with really dealing with it. And Maitreya pledges to take care of everybody who does it. Maitreya lives in the Tushita heaven, and he has a Dharma center there, and the Tibetans very relate to him. Tsongkhapa is there now, Nagarjuna is there now, they say, in this Tushita heaven Dharma center called Manorama. Yiga Chunzin, Manorama Dharma, Yiga Chunzin. It's a Dharma center, delightful Dharma center. And then also, they're also inspired, then Santa Claus, the four Maharajas. Then underneath the heaven of 33, where Indra or Zeus or Odin, or whatever you want to call him, Valhalla, where he presides, under that there's some deities that live on the upper slopes of the cosmic mountain, and then they have four divine kings who are their leaders. And the one of the north, Vaishravana, is like Santa Claus. He's the god of wealth, and he brings gifts to all people. And they jump in and say, oh, we'll also help anybody who does Vimalakirti. They say then the four Maharajika Deva, they're sometimes called, that is the great king deities, the great kings of the quarters. They said to the Buddha, Lord, in all the towns, villages, cities, kingdoms, and palaces, wherever the discourse of the Dharma will be practiced, upheld, and correctly taught, we, the four great kings, will go there with our armies, our young warriors, and our retinues to hear the Dharma. And we will protect the teachers of this Dharma for a radius of 1 league, so that they're 10 miles around, so that no one who plots injury or disruption against these teachers will have any opportunity to do them harm. So then those, if you go to any Buddhist country, you go to the temple, you will see in the gateways, in the 4 directions, you'll see those 4, or if it has only one main gateway, they'll all 4 be in the one gateway. Those 4 great kings, the Maharajika Devas. They're like titans type of thing. They're marvelous. So, okay, that's the holy and noble teaching of Vimalakirti. And I enjoyed so much going through it. And there is a chance, if there are enough good questions, as I mentioned the last time, or at the beginning of the last 3 sessions, or sometime I mentioned, I might do a 13th, to wrap up kind of questions if you have. But otherwise, I've had requests to do other sutras, or I might do some course on Tantra, since we're all locked up and we're all on retreat. We're all in meditative retreat. That's the silver lining of this thing, which of course for people who are totally sick or totally destitute or starving to death all over the planet, it's not, there's no silver lining except us. trying to at least do more for them, make ourselves into instruments that can do more for them. And which we must do now. Actually, there's a little bit, and there's a silver lining, but the silver lining contains within a little bit of a mandate of pressure, which is that we have to realize this is Shakyamuni's Buddha land, Buddhaverse. And we're not going to let it be destroyed by these climate-denying destroyers and these silly people who think that they're going to take their billions of dollars with them or their triplex penthouses to the grave. And they're going to just, therefore they really need more and more. So whatever destructive effect it has on anybody else. Or even that they just be nothing and who cares what happens afterwards. Whatever wrong view they have about their future after they die, which for those senior ones who have the real power won't be long. Like me, they'll be gone soon. Relative, a decade or two, it's an eye blink. So they're very confused and they're doing very much the wrong thing, continuing to wreck this planet, and we mustn't allow them to do that out of compassion for them, as well as for all the other wonderful future generations who will get to read the Vimalakirti in many languages and meditate on it and go to many Menlas in many countries and have many retreats, voluntary, not involuntary, and learn how to be happy and to make this planet happy, which is built for them to be happy in. This environment and this planet has evolved in interaction with us, and it totally wants to make us happy, which it can't do, and it's destroyed and polluted, and its animals are being tortured and extinguished and so forth. And then we just get virus diseases and things like we have now. So we must use this retreat to resolve with all our might, when we are able to move around again, whenever that is, safely and not harmfully to others, to really see to it that we listen to Mother Earth's great oracle of today. Her Indra, her Manjushri, her Vimalakirti, which is, the little Swedish girl Greta Thunberg. Our house here, our planet, our joyful nature, which is our house, is on fire. And we have to start acting like it is on fire. And we have to do it right away, not next year, next decade, 50 years from now. We have it in our power and our knowledge and our technology to do it now. Full blast. We were made to do it now, for example. We just diminished by 10%, at least the amount of pollution of the last 3 or 4 months, maybe 15%. And the Earth is sprouting back in different ways, massively. But that won't last long. And then there's some people who think we should just go back and keep pumping up. And then we'll have, and that's crazy. And we must remove them from power for their own sake. And luckily we have the mechanism to do it, called an election. And which is really just speaking, free speech. We can speak non-duality. We can speak wisdom and compassion. We can speak science and the art of preserving the beautiful planet. Now we dedicate the merit of spending time with Vimalakirti over the last few months to Mother Earth, to Greta Thunberg, to all the poor children and parents and grandparents in Africa, the unborn, in utero, everywhere in the world, in Asia, in Latin America, in the poor places in our own cities and towns, and reservations, and ghettos and so forth, and in our neighboring countries, and also the four-footed and the birds and the worms and the snakes and every animal and the sub-microscopic animals and the dragons and the spirits and the bats. May they keep their viruses working in their microbiomes and not be so despaired that they get released into the air and into us. And may all of them become Buddhas. And may all of them be happy and evolve with maximum evolutionary efficiency toward Buddhahood in this wonderful healing medicinal land of the medicine Buddha Shakyamuni, Vimalakīrti, Akshobhya, Amitabha, Amoghasiddhi, Buddha. Okay? Thank you so much.
This Menla Online broadcast is brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US membership community and viewers like you. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, please visit our website at tibethouse.us.